Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our first virtual Q&A session for our TA2 Roadshow sessions. Today is Saturday, February the 1st. So once again, welcome. This is our first virtual Q&A session for the TA2 Roadshows. Today is Saturday, February the 1st. And first, we will go around and introduce ourselves, and then we'll just get right into it. I am Jeff Peterson, your MEC president with AFA Alaska. I have been a flight attendant since 1999. I am based in San Diego, and I have been MEC president since 2011.
Hi, I'm Sandra Morrow. I've been a flight attendant since 1984, a member of the negotiating team now, and I'm San Diego based.
Hey everyone, my name is Bryce McGee. I've been a flight attendant since 2006. I'm the San Diego local president and also on the negotiating team.
Hi, I'm James Bozanich. I've been a flight attendant since 2009, San Diego based, and also a member of the negotiating committee.
Hi, my name is Kiera Jenkins. I am Seattle based. I have been flying since 2011, and I am also part of the negotiating team.
Hi, I'm Paula Mastrangelo, a senior staff negotiator with AFA. I started negotiating with AFA in 1988, and I have done several Alaska agreements and back working with your team and assisting them with this latest TA2.
Thank you. And then rounding out the team for our support today, I'm going to ask that Justin, Sam, and Brent introduce themselves and what they are doing here today.
Good morning, everyone. I am Justin Weatherall, your negotiation strategic communications representative. I am San Diego based. I've been here for 10 years, and I am here helping the negotiating committee and getting ready for FAQs to be posted later this week.
I am Samantha Wolf. I am the MEC mobilization chairperson, and I am a San Diego-based flight attendant. I've been flying since 2011, and I'm also here just having guiding some support for FAQs and things like that for the negotiating committee, making sure that all of our notes are being recorded properly so we can get more materials out to the membership.
And I'm Brian Palmer. I'm the MEC Vice President and MEC Communications Committee Chairperson. I'm here for technical support and to help moderate questions.
Okay, thanks everyone. In case you have not had an opportunity to take a look at our TA2 page, you go to contract2022.afaalaska.org/TA2, and that has all sorts of great information, including the final text for TA2, a lot of different videos that will explain some of the provisions. We, of course, have our virtual roadshow that we filmed the other day, and a link to the boarding pay and retro calculators.
Yep. Also, the summary of TA2, I don't know if you can see that. No, probably not. And also your balloting and voting credentials will be mailed to your home soon. And polls open on the 11th of February and close on the 28th of February.
All right, Jeff, our first question is from Janny. It's, can you go over any changes with pre-cancellations and reassignments?
I'll take that one. I have to just scroll up to the language so we can read through all of the carve-outs that we have created for reassignment language. And while I'm talking, Justin, if you wouldn't mind pulling up the reassignment examples, I think that would be helpful to run through them. So for pre-cancellation, what's most important to know is that the current system that is available to flight attendants, which is basically you have a pre-cancellation, either crew scheduling is going to try to contact you, you're going to try to contact them. If that doesn't happen between 6 and 8 p.m. the night prior, you are required to call crew scheduling, have a discussion on the phone. They'll probably tell you trips that they have available, whether you see them or don't see them in open time. And then you'll make the decision on whether or not you want to accept one of the assignments or choose to waive pay. So that hasn't changed. I think there might have been a little misconception that we used to do it one way and now we're doing it a different way. For the people who don't want to learn a new system, aren't interested in anything new, that's totally fine. You can still do it the old way that you have always been doing it. What we've added is a little level of convenience now. So as soon as programming is made available, we've introduced pre-cancellation pickup. And so what that means is that prior to that 6 and 8 p.m. window the night prior, flight attendants, because pre-cancellations always don't just come the day before, sometimes they're a week before, sometimes they're at the beginning of the month, as soon as operations realizes that specific flight or pairing isn't going to operate as they initially had thought. The flight attendant is going to basically be able to self-assign themselves a trip that matches the footprint of their pre-canceled trip. And that footprint is going to be the plus or minus 2 hours, which is, again, current contract. And then you're going to be able to select it. You won't have to speak with crew scheduling. You won't have to talk to them. You'll still receive your base pay protection for your originally scheduled trip, and you can go along with your day. Alternatively, like I said, the flight attendant can still follow the old language. We also did migrate our retime LOA into the pre-cancellation section. So you will notice that there is language under 10S that basically describes there are certain changes like retimes of less than 29 minutes, which are not considered pre-cancellations. So those are basically the changes that have occurred with pre-cancellation. And then I also think there were a few more carve-outs for schedule changes. I just want to verify. Okay, there are 5 other limited things that could possibly happen to your pairing that may currently be considered pre-cancellation that will not be on a go-forward basis if TA2 passes. And that's if all RONs in the assignment remain the same, and no individual RON in the assignment is reduced by more than 4 hours, and the total number of legs in the assignment are the same or fewer, and no additional surface deadheads are added to the sequence, and for turns, the city pairs must remain the same. So it's really important to note that with that language, all of those things have to be true. If only one of them is true and not the others, then that's a pre-cancellation, and you can avail yourself to all the other languages, the language available in pre-cancellation. And then I think there was a second part to this question, which was reassignment. We heard loud and clear during the negotiating process that schedule integrity was very high for flight attendants. Ultimately, that is not something that we could achieve. We all work for an airline, and management's philosophy is that they don't really believe in schedule integrity because there are a lot of things that are outside of their control, such as mechanical delays, weather, things of that nature. And so what we were able to do is to basically create a really, really expensive compensation package around reassignment that should effectively discourage a lot of reassignments, and also incentivizes crew scheduling to get flight attendants back onto their original pairing as soon as possible. So with this new reassignment language, it's 1.5 times pay for the entire sequence. You get double time pay for the entire sequence if 4 or more legs then your originally scheduled sequence occurs on a day-for-day comparison. There are a few exceptions to reassignment pay that won't be paid on the entire sequence, but will be paid on a duty period by duty period basis, such as diversions, tech stops, flag stops, air turnbacks, which are takeoffs and returns to the same airport, and earlier report times greater than 29 minutes occurring on the first day of the sequence and accepted by the flight attendant prior to scheduled report. Currently, we only get paid time and a half for the TFP that we fly that's overscheduled. So we hear a lot of complaints like, hey, I was actually supposed to spend Christmas in New York with my family. I picked up a really long JFK, and now I'm being flown 1 leg to Spokane, super long layover, and 1 leg home. That is not what I expected to experience. And currently, when you are reassigned to less than scheduled flying, you only get the pay protection value of whatever you flew, since you flew less. Under TA2, this flight attendant would now get the New York trip paid out at time and a half, the value of that trip, for the flying that they did, the 1 leg to Spokane, long layover, and 1 leg home. Additional exclusions will be overflies, return to gates, flights converted to ferry flights, delays, removing flights from a trip and no flights added, flights or trip number changes but city pairs remain the same, converges to deadhead or from deadhead to working, that'll be handled under 10X deadhead, earlier report times of 29 minutes or less that occur after the commencement of the pairing and are accepted by the flight attendant, and 8S pairings, and that pay is handled in 8S. And then upon further review with this language, we did recognize that there was potential where the contract was silent on certain activities, but we wanted to make very clear that they do not qualify for reassignment. The intent was never for these items to qualify for reassignment, so we just thought that we would clarify it now so it was very clear in the reassignment language. So in TA2, you'll see a difference from TA1 that will include ground activities, excluding surface deadheads. Examples of those are aircraft swaps, pre-boards, adjustments of ground transportation, ground training, and drug and alcohol testing, as well as pairing changes resulting from a flight attendant initiated schedule change, such as deadheads not needed, waiving surface deadheads, trading at a SIP, jet bridge trades, using the fatigue program, commuter recovery options, scheduling adjustments resulting from waiving CBA legalities, such as base turns or revisions. So those are all examples of where you might have scheduling modifications, but they're either initiated by the flight attendant or they're ground activities, so they would not be considered reassignment or eligible for reassignment pay. And here we have examples for reassignment pay and how it would be applicable under TA2 language. In this example, you originally had a 2-day Fort Lauderdale, then you were reassigned to a 2-day YVR. On day one, you'd get paid 1 TFP at 1.5 times for flights flown. Plus, you'll also get the DPM and the premium guarantee of 3 TFP and 3.2 TFP paid at 1.5 times for the flights that were not made up in the sequence. On day two, you'll receive 7.7 TFP at 1.5 times flown because that was the actual TFP that you experienced on day two. And the way that we structured reassignment pay is that you get paid on a day-for-day basis, what you were scheduled to fly or what you actually flew at 1.5 times. So the current total pay would be 14.4 TFP at straight time and 0.5 TFP at 1.5 time for the overscheduled flying. However, under the new TA2 total, you'll receive 14.9 TFP at 1.5 times. Here's another example of when a flight attendant was originally scheduled to fly a Maui, and then they were reassigned to a Fort Lauderdale, which was greater than what they were originally scheduled. This flight attendant would now receive under TA2 day one paid at 7.2 TFP at 1.5 times and 7.2 TFP on day two at 1.5 times. Currently, they're only paid 14 TFP at straight time and 0.4 TFP at 1.5 times. The new total TA2 value of the trip will be 14.4 TFP at 1.5 times.
Our next question is from Crystal. How will the two sick leave banks work regarding leave, such as maternity? Will you be able to coordinate both banks, and which bank is coordinated first?
Okay, I can take that one. TA2, there we go. All right, 15M1 is coordination of leaves. And if you see in there that it's actually right in here, that you may choose to coordinate from either the CBA or the state sick leave bank one at a time, or a combination of either one. So just like today, you can pick to coordinate either with sick leave and or vacation. In this case, you will now have two different banks that you can coordinate from, either one at a time or a combination of both.
Our next question is from Wendy. Can you please confirm that 960 is no longer a requirement for the 7th week of vacation?
Oh, I hope that's a typo and that we're not going to disappoint you, Wendy. So it is true that the 960 is no longer a requirement, but is for the 6th week of vacation. It would be fantastic if we had 7 weeks, but we don't have that at this point. But for the 6th week, you no longer have to fly 960.
All right, next question is from Paula. Why can't voting start sooner?
Oh, Paula, I feel like this is a rhetorical question. I think you know the answer, but thank you for asking on behalf of the group, because I'm sure they want to know. So why can't it start sooner? First, there is the constitutional requirement that voting is open for a minimum of 18 days. And we are right at that number with our opening on the 11th and closing on the 28th. And then it's just a function of being able to do road shows, do some Q&A sessions before voting opens. We also had to get the TA summary booklet to the vendor to be stuffed into the mailers to go out with ballots. So when you add all those numbers together, we might have been able to shave a couple days off of it, but not much. So realistically, no. That's why it is taking as long as it is. We are already at the constitutional minimum, plus just a little bit of time to ship out ballots.
Right. And on top of that, the joint MEC elections were this past week in San Francisco. So merging the MECs from Hawaii and Alaska. So that also took up quite a bit of bandwidth.
All right, our next question is from Kathy. I currently have 11 bank points, and I see the max in the new contract is 6. Will I lose my 5 bank points?
Definitely
can
not.
answer this.
Okay, go for it, Bryce. Yeah, please explain
Okay.
why. 'Cause I'm like, please no, let's not lose it.
Yeah, so currently our max is 6, so it hasn't changed from our current book. And the reason why you and many others have more than 6 is because we were gifted those for various reasons. And so the max is still 6. So if you use yours and fall below 6, the max you can go back up to is 6, but you won't lose them. And so if they gift us more in the future, then of course we can get more than 6. But that's why that language is still there and it hasn't changed.
All right, our next question is from Matt. I noticed the PPP amount went back to our current CBA amount compared to TA1. What was traded, quote unquote, for this in TA2?
I can take a stab, but I think this should be a group effort from the committee because this obviously was a very lengthy and discussion amongst all of us about what was the best way to kind of allocate funds. So, Matt, you are correct. The PPP did go down from 4,000 to 2,500, which is basically what the current book payout is. When the company, we started TA2 negotiations, the company was very clear that we are not putting any more money into this deal. And that was something that we had to, obviously, there are enhancements in this contract that did go above that, but the thing is they were very adamant about they weren't putting more money into this. I think membership also needs to, and I'm going to be honest, needs to be aware that when you vote down something, everything is back up on the table again. So that because we never secured what we had once it was voted down, we had to start from scratch again. So luckily we were able to pick up the majority from where we started at TA1. But again, it was everything was fair game at this point, and they wanted to gut reassignments and do all these things, and we held the line on all that stuff. So I just want to throw that out there. When we looked at exactly from the survey results, what were the most important things for flight attendants, surprisingly, the PPP was not one of those. It was boarding pay, it was pay rates, it was all the, longevity pay, all of these things that we didn't either scrapped somewhat or didn't achieve more of. And so we had to take a very methodical approach of, okay, what can we do with the money that we have in certain circumstances and allocate them the way that they affect the most amount of flight attendants across the board. And with PPP, if you work, it's great because you know that you're going to get this money. The reality is about 25% of the workforce actually achieves PPP. So when you look at where the real benefit is, it made more sense to take that money and enhance these provisions that actually affect everybody, like stepping up to A pay right away, cutting off that 1 year of the 0.5 for the 401k match. Those actually benefit the majority of flight attendants more than what that PPP did. So that just seemed like a natural thing to actually go out because there was a substantial amount of money inside that provision itself. So if anyone else has some input or some context to that.
Yeah, I think what James said is completely spot on. And also, we went really heavy in improving boarding pay. That was a 20% gain in boarding pay. And across the map, that elevates everyone's pay. It's a multiplier. So that was really kind of a no-brainer when it came down to, well, what do we do with TFP? And I will say the company was trying to be very helpful in finding money in the contract, i.e. in terms of concessions from TA1. They wanted us to really kind of gut the flying into a day off pay that was 2.5 times. They're like, you can take that down to 2 or even 1.5 and people probably wouldn't even notice. It's a benefit, and we were like, no, we're not doing that. you are taking away someone's time off. You're going to pay for that. So anyway, so it was a balancing act, and we really, really had to fight at the very end. And it really came down to the very end to figure out what the package would look like.
Yeah,
And just
I
to add
also-
on, oh, sorry, go ahead. Go ahead, Kiki.
I think that perspective is really important when it comes to these types of things. So when we went into the room day one, the narrative that we were facing from management was there's no more money. You can change whatever you want in TA1, but we're not giving you another dime. So internally, it was basically on this committee to move around money. And that is not unique to Alaska Airlines. That is pretty common practice across the industry. And I think that if a lot of people took time to look at the difference between TA1s and TA2s for the majority of carriers, especially in the last decade, and what they were able to accomplish between TA1 and TA2, oftentimes, it's not this like XXXXXL package of like, I told you so, we would gain so and so much more. It's really just the illusion that there's all of this change occurring. And so it was really put on us to fight for every extra dime that you see in this contract. When I say that this committee worked very, very hard to squeeze more money out of a really stonewall management that didn't want to give us anything else, like that's really what happened behind the scenes. And to James's credit, I would say the last session, James bullied management left, right, all over the place on a lot of different provisions and really wanted credit for a lot of the things that we were doing to work with them and to offset productivity and things like that. He demanded that they give us credit for all of these items. And so when you go into negotiations, it's not just so simple as we want more and you're going to give it to us. It is, how do we restructure the amount of money that was allotted to us? They've already had that number picked months before we even started TA1 negotiations. They knew how much they were going to spend on the contract, and that was their number. And it was up to us to bully them into a different number and come to a different realization. And so there was just a lot of work put into that. And at the end of the day, as James had mentioned earlier, we had to reflect on how could we benefit more people without hurting so many. And when you look at only 25% of everybody achieving PPP, while every single flight attendant, if you come to work and work on an aircraft, will be paid boarding pay. Boarding pay, just when I say it outshines a lot of the other pay components in the contract. As people start coming to work, you'll realize the huge benefit in boarding pay and that you will make up what you're missing out in PPP like that.
Yeah. And, it's, this is the thing. So no one knows the contract better than basically your AFA leadership. And everyone at this table is so fine-tuned about the intricacies of how this works. Now, the company obviously knows the contract too, because they have to administer certain provisions and things like that. But what they don't realize is when we come in with provision, we know exactly if we were to change this, all of the ramifications that's going to have. We were super on top of that, and the company wasn't. So if you look at the boarding pay increase, yeah, boarding pay is extra money. So on the surface, boarding pay is money, but boarding pay also qualifies you for the PPP. So it's like a compounding thing. So if you increase the boarding pay, those that were not achieving PPP originally because they didn't fly any extra, that 75%, now if you just fly your line, that extra 0.08% or extra 0.08 TFP increase in the aggregate will allow more people to achieve PP as is. So that's already a benefit on top of that. Plus, you get sick leave accrual on top of that. And the company did not cost any of that stuff because they didn't know all of the tentacles that were involved with increasing this one figure. So one might look at, hey, we did, come down on the PPP payments. But at the end of the day, we actually are making up so much more in the compounding of all of this provision. So flight attendants are actually will be making out more in the aggregate with this, the way that it is structured. So.
Right. And also one last thing on this, we did fight so hard at the bargaining table and against management's kind of attitude, like we're not going to encourage people to vote down an agreement and come back, with a better TA2. So, you guys find the money and we'll work with you on that. But I just small little secret, we did add more money into the TA2.
All right, our next question comes from Martin. Were any attempts made to increase pay for vacation, improve the vacation allotment, or hold the company accountable for vacations trading system failures?
I mean, I wrote, I don't know how many people were on Facebook, but I did make a response in Galley T that I think there is this really big misconception that vacation is daily paid vacation, and that is not how vacation is designed to work, essentially. We don't bid for vacation on a day-for-day basis. We bid it on a weekly basis. Truly, that's how our bidding is constructed because it's supposed to supplement a week's worth of flying. And the majority of flight attendants, unless they're waiving 48/7, are not working 7 days a week. So it's not replacing each single day, it's replacing a week's worth of flying. And so when you look at it, 28 TFP is right around probably some of the highest flying you can do, with the exception of those who can hold multiple 4Ks and design their schedule as such to fly more than that during the week. And so when we're looking at vacation pay, we should be looking at it as a weekly or a monthly subjective view. And when you take it at a month and a time view, that's 112 TFP per month. That is more than a flight attendant will be able to bid for, even on the high end, if they're trying to maximize the TFP allotment during their bidding process. And so I think maybe that's where the confusion comes from. We are also on a day-for-day basis with the 6th week in TA2, the highest paid vacation in the industry, and oftentimes higher than pilots. I think there may be only one pilot group who might have a higher vacation pay than us. So when we're talking about vacation pay, I think it's really important to understand that it's not designed to replace 1 day of flying. It's designed to replace a week's worth of flying and a month's worth of flying. That is the function of vacation pay. So hopefully that will bring a little bit understanding, because me as a line flight attendant, if I don't have any vacation, it's really difficult for me to try to bid and build my schedule to the same amount of time that a whole month vacation line would equal, which is 112 TFP. Like, I can't do that as a line flight attendant.
And then I'll just chime in on the second part of this, which is, do we make attempts to increase the pay for vacation? So TA1, all of this is yes. We attempted to increase the pay for vacation, improve the vacation allotment, and to hold the company accountable for various system failures. For TA2, honestly, we moved off of several of these we didn't propose because it was clear we weren't going to get anywhere with that. And I actually don't know, I don't remember, maybe the team can help out with the vacation pay. Did we have that in the original or no?
Yeah.
We did. Okay, we did, yeah. So not for the system failures, but vacation pay we still had on the table for TA2.
Ultimately,
Okay.
all of this comes down to cost, right? I also mentioned that in my comment. The JNC can always venture down this road. In my example, I think it came out to 11.36 million if we're asking for one more TFP for flying at that new rate of $58, which is that year 10 is about average, and that year 10 is also when you get your 4th week. So like I said, it might not seem on an individual basis when someone's saying, well, it only costs $600 for me or $800 for me as a one flight attendant. You actually have to multiply that by 7,000 flight attendants, and then you have to take into consideration whether or not we want to do it during the bidding process or not. Because if we're doing it through the bidding process, that's one less TFP that each 7,000 flight attendant is going to fly throughout the year. And so they have to hire more reserves to cover 7,000 TFP worth of flying. So that increases your costs even more when you're looking at vacation pay. So it's not as simple as oh, just pay me singularly $800 more. It doesn't seem like a lot of money. There's a lot more tentacles that go into vacation pay than just the money.
Right. We have a few questions about the quarterly point reduction form, so I'm going to try to combine questions from Lisa. Her question was, can you please explain how losing one of the quarterly point reduction forms will affect us, and how the state sick bank works to make up for that? Kind of coupled with that, a question from Kathy: when will the 2 sick leave banks be live and active? And then there was another question also from Amy about, can you discuss, was management willing to keep the 4-point reduction forms, or was that a hard no? So maybe we can combine an answer to all that.
First off, we did propose going back to book and deleting the state sick bank provision and retaining the 4th quarterly point reduction. That we proposed that like boom right off the bat, and they freaked out. One of the reasons they want that is they're worried about their legal liability. They want to be in compliance with the state sick laws.
So how's losing one of the quarterly point reduction forms going to affect us?
Well, it depends how it works with the state sick bank. I mean, if flight attendants have sick leave in the state bank, it provides like a lot of liability protection against attendance points and a lot more flexibility, because today the sick leave, in order to use quarterly point reduction, your sick leave has to be continuous. Whereas in the state sick bank, it doesn't have to be, consecutive pairings. So it depends on everyone's specific situation.
So I'll jump in on this too, that so for the 2025, so for this year, we actually still keep the 4-point reduction forms. So it's a little bit of a training wheels for us to get used to what is coming for 2026. So we will be able to use the 4 this year. The company says that they can implement the 2 banks really soon. They were saying as soon as March, which we don't think that's actually accurate, but that's what they were saying at the table. So let's just say it's probably sooner than later. I think earlier in the year than say later in the year. Once those banks are implemented, of course, if you have any TFP in your CBA bank, up to 40 will slide over to the state bank to fund that. And all of that TFP will be protected. And the great thing about the 2 banks is that you really can use them strategically. So I know there's been some concerns about the requirement or potential requirement for verification with the state bank, that the company that they can designate up to 3 times a year, 10 days, where they require doctor's note. They have to give us notice. Well, even if they do that, provided that you haven't used your CBA bank point reduction form, you actually can switch at any time, and this is whether you've used your forms or not. You can switch from one bank to the other by the end of the next sequence. So you have that time to decide to switch them. And that way, if you actually started using your state bank, they require the verification. You can just switch to the CBA bank, which doesn't require verification. So there's quite a few ways to make these 2 coordinate together, where even though we no longer have 4 reductions in the year for the CBA bank, it's down to 3. When you're using that in combination with the state bank, it really is very favorable. So we don't see that as being, I wouldn't call it a loss. It's just that it's going to be a different way of utilizing your sick leave using the 2 banks.
Right. And if you don't utilize your sick leave, at the end of the year, you can, anything over 40 TFP, you get cashed out at 100%.
And if I can add on, so how I've been answering it on social media is nothing changes from the way you currently use your sick bank. They just added an additional resource. So sick family, sick child, FMLA, the way you've always called out sick remains the same. This gives you an additional bank to use as well.
So did we also answer, was management willing to keep it, or was that a hard no?
That's an easy one, hard no.
Oh, absolutely. Like they wouldn't have closed the agreement without it.
Okay. And then also, I think, Bryce, you just answered, is there a maximum accrual for the state sick bank?
I'm not sure if Bryce answered that one, but
Okay.
no. There's an effective max in that there's only so much a person can fly in a year, but because at the end of the year, it gets snapped again, where you have up to 40 that rolls over to the following year. And then the overage, either you can get cashed out or you can put that overage into your CBA bank to continue to accrue it up to the max of 2,400.
And then also another sick leave related question. Are we the only work group that has 2 sick banks? Question from Paula.
No, we're not. So, well, yeah, we're not. It depends on how you define sick bank, I suppose. But the pilots, for instance, they do have 2 banks. So that bank, the second bank, is when they're absent for an extended period of time for rapid reaccrual. So it's not exactly the same application, but we're not the only group that has 2 banks.
All right, our next question comes from Tristan. Did we retain the extra 4 TFP for going into a day off, regardless of days off?
Effectively, yes. So this is also another one. What we ended up doing was I think it's 1.6 TFP here. Let me do the math really quick, but I think I'm right.
It's 1.6 paid at 2.5 times, which equals 4.
Which equals 4. So at the very minimum, if you are on minimum days off, you will at least receive even the 4 TFP that existed in current book. And then if the value of that specific leg is greater than 1.6 TFP, you'll get that paid at 2.5 times.
Yeah, and just some kind of the thought process behind this. You could work into a minimum day off on a Spokane leg, and if you're only getting 2.5 times on a Spokane leg, that would pay out less than what our current application of 4 is. So it was structured in a way that you'll get minimum 4 or 2.5 times the value of your trip if it's greater. So.
All right, next question is from Calvin. Is the sick leave payout retirement the same as TA1?
I can answer that one. Yes, we were able to keep what we achieved in TA1, but also we were able to add, if you have been a flight attendant for 30 years, you could at that point cash out also.
And that cash out would be at 100%, irregardless of your sick leave balance. So if you were 30 years and you only had, let's say, 150 TFP in your account, that would qualify under the normal condition of only being paid 25% of that. But at 30 years, it's 100% cash out, regardless what you have. So.
All right. Next question comes from Chase about boarding pay. If a flight is boarded or partially boarded and subsequently deplanes due to mechanical or another reason, and then we reboard the same aircraft, are we paid for both boardings?
I can answer that one. No, the answer is no. That is not. You're not paid for both boardings. It is a single boarding. So the only times when we are paid for more than one boarding on the same flight, essentially, is when there is a tail swap. So if you're deplaned, different aircraft, reboard, or if you actually take off. So if you take off and then have to come back, say, to the same airport, so you've actually done a takeoff and landing, then you would get 2 boardings.
Right. We have a question about vacation entitlement from Kathy. So will 25% of a flight attendant's vacation entitlement from the previous year be credited for 2026 vacation? If a flight attendant did not fly hard time 480 in the previous year, will 25% vacation entitlement still apply similar to insurance?
Okay, so it says from the previous year, she's saying, Kathy, you're saying this year, I'm assuming you're saying this year, 2025. So will 25% of your vacation entitlement from 2025 be credited for 2026 vacation? And the answer would be yes. If you didn't fly hard time in the previous year, no. You actually have to achieve the 480. It's not the same application where it's like, say, for healthcare, where it's the soft credit no matter what. It's a quarter of your entitlement.
All right. Question from Laurel, back to reassignments. Did you say that if you pick up a trip and waive, quote unquote, will you not qualify for the 1.5 times pay?
I think that might be confusing 2 different provisions. There's pre-cancellation, which flight attendants have the opportunity to waive pay, and then there's reassignments. The only time a flight attendant doesn't maintain their reassignment pay protection and that 1.5 times is if they voluntarily trade out of the assignment that they were reassigned into by crew scheduling. So let's say I had the Maui, I was reassigned to the Fort Lauderdale. I decide I actually don't want to go to Fort Lauderdale. I go into open time and I voluntarily trade out of that Fort Lauderdale. I lose the pay protection and I lose that 1.5 times. So I have to keep whatever reassignment trip that crew scheduling ends up giving me.
And another reassignment related question from Anna. Do reserves qualify for reassignment pay or just line holders?
I know that this is not going to be the answer that reserves like to hear, but technically reserves can't be reassigned. You're just a reserve. You're on call. Crew scheduling can always modify your sequence. That is effectively the function of being on reserve and having reserve flight attendants. And just for full transparency, even line holders, a lot of the times what we hear as feedback is that reserves actually have more schedule integrity than line holders do. Like that is really how much we try to protect reserves and ensure that, yes, they are dealing with brutal long hours on call. So we try to make that experience, even though it's very short, as comfortable as possible. That's something that I think that most of the group is always gearing towards. But at the end of the day, you're a reserve. Like that is literally your function, is to make sure the operation continues when line holders can't be on the sequence that they originally were scheduled to be on. So the answer is no, reserves do not get reassignment, but I think that we did a pretty excellent job of getting something that typically is not afforded to reserves in the unscheduled deadhead section. So we did sneak a few lollipops and treasures in there for reserves. We really did try our best. But again, technically going from an unscheduled to scheduled deadhead is not really something that is available to reserves, but that's something that's in there. So
Yeah. However, if a reserve is picking up on a day off, then they would be eligible for reassignment pay.
All right, we have a question from Taylor about the ratification date. Why was the ratification date March 2nd and not February 28th? TA1, and in the past in 2014, it was mid-month, so why not the date voted in?
I can answer that one. Actually, the date of ratification is 2/28. So the date that our pay rates increases on 3/2 to align with the beginning of the mid month for March. Actually, several of the pay provisions, so it's a clean cutover. But at the same time, we're not even losing anything in the sense that your TA2 pay rates snap all the way back to May of 2024. So that will all be caught up with the retro pay anyway for the 2 days in between with the pay rates.
And then to answer kind of the second part, like the mid-month last time, Jeff answered this earlier. It was pretty much impossible to get this, any quicker into February. The 28th is the date. And then what he just explained makes it a cleaner cutover for everything else.
All right, we have a clarifying question from Allison. Clarifying, we were talking about PPP, and her question is, PPP is affected by the boarding pay, correct? It sounded like PBP. The months affected by those bonus months is PPP, correct?
Yes. So phonetic alphabet, we're talking about Papa, 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 and not Papa, Bravo, Papa. So yes, it is the PPP. PBP is the company-owned performance-based pay, so that's not part of our CBA. So
yeah, but that is based on your pay, and boarding pay bumps up your pay. So
yeah, okay, yeah. So that
say
it will have a
you're also increasing the PBP.
So that again, that's another one of those tentacles whereby increasing boarding pay will overall give you higher compensation across the board in a good year with high profits.
Hey, Brian, can we, maybe it's just on mine, but Janie, I think that we have gone past it a couple of times.
Jani's question. Yeah. So Janie had a question, and it looks like she was attempting to clarify maybe something with reassignments or pre-cancellations.
I'm sure it's pre-cancellations.
Yeah, so I can answer this. So Janie, if you have not made contact with crew scheduling or they have not made contact with you prior to 6 and between 6 and 8 the night prior to the trip, you will still have to, well, I guess if you made contact originally and then you didn't have a resolution and they said, hey, call back between 6 and 8 the night prior, you will still need to make that call between 6 and 8 the night prior. So if you're not choosing the pre-cancel pickup option, you will have to make the second call between 6 and 8 if you were instructed to by crew scheduling, and then that will snap your footprint to the original scheduled footprint of your pre-cancel flight. So like I said, if you want to operate on the current process, you are more than welcome to do that. None of the things that you are required to do as far as pre-cancellation is concerned has changed. So the system that you're used to, you will still continue needing to do if you do not utilize the pre-cancellation pickup.
Okay, moving on to
yeah, Justin's saying, and I think I agree about that she might mean no two calls in the 6 to 8 p.m. time frame.
Yes, we did. We did improve that. Is if the first contact that a flight attendant is making is in that 6 to 8 p.m. window, this is the first conversation you've ever had with crew scheduling, you will not be required to hang up and call back again immediately. You can just sort out the pre-cancellation options at that time.
All right, question from Matt. What do you see as the biggest gain in this TA over the last TA?
Probably boarding, right? I mean, I think that's the biggest thing in terms of like just the dollars and the amount of impact it has for everybody, and like so many different provisions that it touches in a positive way. I think it's boarding.
Yeah, and getting rid of the phase-ins for the 401k and or moving them up and for A pay, but really boarding pay is the biggest hit.
And I
Yeah.
think financially, definitely boarding pay. I think that I'll take a book out of page out of management's book. On a philosophical level, I do believe that I guess it's the maybe experience of more senior flight attendants that they have really sacrificed a lot throughout the years to ensure that the more junior people were able to work under roles that made this job sustainable and turn into careers, because they remember what it felt like to be, a new hire and not have enough money and be on ER call all the time with pagers and never really having a life. So for me, getting that longevity of $1 back was really big for those who were really looking for something to have at year 16, and then also that 30 plus year 100% sick leave payout. That was something that, quite frankly, I think is really important to a lot of flight attendants. I've heard so many different stories, and we are a very, what I would classify as a super caring and kind and emotional group. And I hear stories of flight attendants who are like, I've worked here for 40 years and then I got breast cancer and I drained my sick leave. And now the company only wants to pay me 25%, or I've been working here and I had to deal with an ailing parent, or I had a child who had special needs. And there's so many reasons why people will end up draining their sick leave bank. Everyone, I think, has a story of why their sick leave is where it's at. And I think the least we could have done for those senior folks who consistently voted for the junior people at every opportunity they have for contracts pass is that, your sick leave is yours. You should take it when you go. So we did do it again. This was like definitely part of a math game as well. We did have to go back and look at where do we draw the line in the sand where we can justify putting enough money into that bucket without, harming a lot of the other flight attendants, because it is just a few who will get to actualize and experience this specific provision. But again, a small thank you for those really senior folks who, again, at every turn tried to make life easier for junior folks.
Also, just have to call out the caps on insurance premiums that we're able to achieve. It's like there were like a lot of little nuggets in here, and that one is very significant. I mean, the caps that imposes on how much your insurance premiums can go up each year is is really significant.
Yeah, just to talk about the insurance, if you've had a chance to watch the virtual roadshow yet, we came into with the insurance caps that the way that they are set now with what we are currently paying. We have been benefiting from the 2018 agreement, which locked in insurance rates at 2019 rates. So we are paying by far the least amount in the entire company. And we have basically solidified this, or we have almost protected with this with minimal increases because our rate was so low and we were able to secure very minimal percentage increases to this, where we are in a very good place when it comes to insurance. So that was a real big win for us there. And then also just, there were a lot of concerns non-monetarily about language and cleanup, and this doesn't make sense, or I need this protection for my maternity to be able to go out or not go out because I'm pregnant. And again, we were able to go through there and just really fix up the concerns with that. And again, not monetarily, but it had a very emotional impact on our flight attendants. And we were able to correct all those little things due to the feedback that we received through emails and the survey as well. So.
All right. Question from Samuel. Was there any attempt during negotiations to allow the flight attendants to move sick time from their CBA bank to their state bank if the state bank was low or out of sick time?
Okay, I'll take a stab at this, and anyone can chime in if you feel like I mischaracterized it. But that specific thing about moving one to the other, I don't recall us proposing, but we did propose a lot of other variations that had the same idea between rapid accrual for the state bank. There were several different things that we tried that the company was not willing to do that. But in terms of actually moving sick time from your CBA bank to your state bank, we did not propose that. At least not that I recall.
Okay. Question from Sean. Are we allowed to trade or swap premium in TA2?
Yes. So in TA2, we did keep the TA1 language, and that flight attendants will be allowed to swap their premium pay trips with other flight attendants. However, it will revert to the lowest value for the two trips. So if I have a trip that's worth double time and Sean, you have a trip that's worth time and a half, and we end up trading trips, we'll both receive just time and a half. And you will, we're ironing out a little bit of exactly when is the absolute latest a flight attendant can call crew scheduling to notify them of this swap change. But my advice to most flight attendants is if they want to take use of this specific provision is to call before you do the trade. They'll process the trade and then they'll put the premium indicators on the pairing, but we're still ironing out like what's the absolute latest a flight attendant can give notification that those premium trips were traded. So just like currently today, you wouldn't be allowed to do for obviously safety reasons, to do a position swap without calling them first. So I think that will end up being the intent of this premium pay swap language, is that you have to call them and let them know what's going on, that you've traded positions and responsibilities, or if you're actually trading different pairings. So we'll get a little bit more information as the date comes closer, but that is something that flight attendants can use starting March 2nd.
All right. Kind of segueing back to sick leave cash out. Another question that's a follow-up from Allison on behalf of Janice, who's a 35 plus year flight attendant. What about sick leave cash out for those of us who are eligible for retirement but don't have the full 850 hours in the bank? How does that work again?
I can recap that one if you want. So the difference we achieved in TA2 from TA1 is the 30 plus years you can cash out if you're eligible for retirement at 100% regardless of how much is in your sick bank. So that was what was achieved. Like here. So if you're less than 30, you can do the, depending on which bank you fall into, the 25%, the 50, the 100. But if you're 30 plus years or more, you get 100% no matter what your bank is.
All right. We have a question from Calvin. Can we go over the retro pay?
Sure.
So
Anyone? Yeah. You wanna do it? Sure.
it could be me. Okay,
Okay.
so the way that the retro pay is structured is that flight attendants will receive a 3% payout for any all TFP that was credited to you between December 1st, 2022 through November 2023. And then a 6.1% payout for all TFP from December 2023 through April 2024. And then you'll receive all TFP from May 2024 to present at the difference of the current rate and TA2 rates at 100% for May 2024 through March 2nd.
Question from Mary about per diem. Is our per diem in line with the pilots, as we have to buy meals in the same places that they do?
James.
About the per diem. So the thing about per diem is we understand that per diem is the cost, or it basically reimburses what the cost of to provide food and stuff on a layover and that stuff. The thing is about per diem is per diem is extremely expensive. And for every, was it 5 cents, Paula? I can't remember what the dollar figure was, but for like every 5 cents increase in per diem, it's actually a significant amount of money. And so this all comes down to like, where do you allocate the funds at the end of the day? Per diem is also one of these things where what a lot of flight attendants don't realize, and we got some really creative emails that came through over the past couple of years saying, hey, how about we don't increase our pay rates, but we increase our per diem by like $5 or $6 so that we get like a non-taxable, basically wage increase, things like that. And the thing is, that's actually against like the tax laws don't allow for that to happen. So basically, if you get reimbursed over a certain amount for what the CONUS rate is for that city, a flight attendant actually experiences taxable income on that, even if it's a layover. So that's one thing to keep in mind with these like super high per diem rates. But at the end of the day, like per diem is not considered income. And we felt that at this time, it was more important to pump money into things that are actually considered income because of the actual compounding effects that it has with everything else. And so that's the direction that we chose to go with this, with the pending, JCBA negotiations happening. There's going to be a lot of opportunity to reevaluate the per diem scheme because we're going to have true international flying and all these other things. So we're pretty confident this is going to be a hot topic when it comes to the next set of negotiations. But at this time, it just made more sense to focus on the other rates, knowing that also that these rates were going to be stepped in too with the per diem we currently have. So it was just a strategic choice to put the money somewhere else this time, knowing that it was definitely going to be addressed in the next contract. So.
Thinking of next contract, that segues into our next question from Laurel. Can you explain what would happen if TA2 is voted down?
I know,
Yeah, you
Paul,
want me to take that one?
to answer this question.
Okay, so basically, if TA2 is voted down, the focus would be on JCBA negotiations, and we would enter JCBA negotiations or joint contract negotiations with the base being your current contract. Management has already said, look, we are super busy. We're a lean management machine. We are super focused on the integration and jumping through all the hoops for the DOT and the FAA on this merger. We do not have the bandwidth or the time to devote to additional TA negotiations, for a TA3. The National Mediation Board and our mediator has also been very direct and very clear with us that they would not devote further efforts probably to us because they have a lot of things going on and a lot of demands for their services. And they're like, if you vote down this TA, it would be very unlikely that we would devote more resources to mediating, the sessions, bargaining sessions for a TA3. So it is just super unlikely that we would engage or be able to engage in negotiations for a TA3. And just to tell you, we already have JCBA negotiations set for March March 18th is when we commenced JCBA negotiations. And that was, that's already on the books, and the team has already been elected, and we're moving forward with the joint contract negotiations. And I do want to say that's not a scare tactic. I'm not trying to scare anybody. That's just those are the facts. So I just want to make sure everybody understands the situation.
So I
Hey,
see
Brian, can we back up just a little, or are you answering this question, James?
Yeah, so
Still-
sorry. Yeah, we don't have the same per diem rates as the pilots. So ours is slightly less. So just to answer that, full transparency, I think I just went under the assumption that that was known because but yeah, we don't have the same rates. They have international and domestic and stuff like that. And so what I was trying to get at with my answer, just without communicating that aspect, is that is something that will be brought forward in the next round of negotiations. But with the current round that we were in, we thought it was more appropriate to allocate the funds that we could play with and the other provisions that we had versus the per diem rates.
Do we happen to know what if they got an increase in their per diem with the most recent, I'll call it extension? Because I just looked it up. The pilot domestic rate was lower than our per diem rate, but they have international higher, so it's just different.
No,
I can pull up the
Last I checked with 255.
Just so everybody watching knows what the group is answering right now, this is a clarifying question from Krista asking to specifically address whether or not we received the same rates as the pilots.
I just pulled up the pilot's MRA extension, and there's nothing in there about per diem.
Okay, so we're slightly ahead in the domestic per diem, and we're behind in the international per diem.
Okay.
And then, sorry to swap back to the other question, which was, what will happen if we vote down TA2? And I apologize because I was actually looking for the pilot rates and wasn't 100% keyed in. Did we talk about the NMB or any of that? Did we get into that?
Yeah, I talked about the fact that the mediator and the board members have been very direct with us that they won't they are very unlikely to devote further resources to mediating TA3 bargaining.
Right. Besides the fact that based on the recent turmoil in the government, it is really unclear if there will be further changes in the NMB too. So that's a whole other layer of uncertainty on top of this.
Yeah, so just so you know how that works, there are 2 Democratic board members right now and 1 Republican. And because we have a Republican in the administration, that will flip, and there will be 2 Republican board members and 1 Democratic board member. And I think we can all kind of project out how that's going to work for us. So.
There's also a follow-up question to that from Samuel. Do we know if the mediator would release us from mediation if we did vote down TA2, since they say they can't allocate more time to dedicate to us?
Oh, okay. So how it works is we would have to file for a proffer of arbitration, which I think is where this question is going. And then if it was granted, we would be released into a 30-day cooling off period. And then, at the end of 30 days, we could strike if there was not a presidential emergency board called. I just have to say, I believe that is absolutely off the table, especially with this administration, because, who's in the White House really impacts our ability to get released.
I'll just chime in on that. I think there is a near 0% chance that would happen.
Yeah, pretty much.
May I go back to the insurance question real quickly? Just to provide some actual information. So I had to jog my memory here. And so this is now, I know exactly why we did what we did. So the pilot domestic rate for per diem was $255 in 2022 with a 5-cent increase every year through the duration of the contract. So that would be 2 years down the road. So right now that they are at $265 with our TA2, we are coming out of the gate, I believe, at $275 is what our rate is going to go up to. So
but then it niches up to $285.
Yeah, and then over the course of the agreements, it's 5 cents increase, similar to the pilot. So we are already ahead of the pilots by 10 cents out the gate with this. The pilots do have an international component, which is $3, and then it goes up 5 cents every year after that. So right now they would be at $3.10 for international. But if you look at the current network that we fly, our network is predominantly domestic flying. We do have obviously international flights down south and things like that, and up in Canada, but it's not. It's a fraction of what we actually fly as flight attendant. So if you look at the actual amount of trips we're doing, we're on par, if not possibly ahead anyways, where we currently are with TA2, just given the amount of the amount of flying that will fall into the domestic bucket for us at already being 10 cents ahead of the pilots. So I hope all those kind of tidbits answers that question, but if not, please put it in the chat.
Okay, question from Katrina. Just to clarify, in TA2, if we fly into our day off, we only get compensated if we have minimum days off. TA1 had compensation for any flying into days off, regardless of how many days you had.
No, the TA1 language it remains the same. Someone just specifically asked about the 4 TFP for minimum days off. So both provisions still exist in TA2. Regardless of minimum days off, you will still receive double time and a half for flying into your day off. I think, do we say 15 minutes? I'll have to go back and double check. But
Yeah, it's
I'm
15 minutes.
confident it's 15 minutes. So you have to block in at midnight or wait, is it flying in or blocking in? I will double check the language again, but it's by 15 minutes.
Yeah, so it includes the debrief.
Yeah. So block in after midnight, essentially. Then you will get that credit of double time and a half for that specific leg, regardless of your number of days off. And then in addition, if you're flying into a day off and you're already on minimum days, we're just saying the minimum amount that will be paid at 2.5 times would be 1.6 TFP. We have a lot of other similar language to this where there's a 1 TFP minimum value, so no less than 1 TFP. So this is very similar to that language, but we say no less than 1.6, so they can get the same pay compensation as 4 TFP.
All right, we have a question from Allison that kind of segues into JCBA negotiations. So I think, Paula, this one might be for you. What might the guesstimate or the best guess for JCBA negotiations to be finalized, and what might that timeline look like? And is there a chance of gaining more benefits for the current contract in moving this into one streamlined merge? Also a question of, do we see this current contract improving work-life benefits moving into the combined group? And if you have some examples of where Hawaiian is ahead of us that we can potentially see moving forward.
Okay. I'm not exactly sure I understand the question, but I'm going to take a stab at it. And Allison, just, write back in the chat or in the Q&A if I'm not addressing it correctly. So JCBA negotiations are, just to set expectations, are probably going to take at least 2 years. You have two incredibly mature and very complex contracts that are very, very different. And plus the flying that you all do is very, very different. I mean, before the merger, Hawaiian was mostly doing out and backs, like could be a 5-day trip, but it would be one leg there, one leg back. Very different from you guys. And obviously they have a 14.5 hour, can do a scheduled duty day for those long international trips like to Japan or Auckland. And you guys have a 10.5 hour duty day. So, I mean, we're going to have to figure out how, this all is going to work. So it's going to take some time. Obviously, we want to do the best of both contracts, and that's going to be our methodology out of the gate. So let me see. Is there a chance of gaining more benefits for the current contract and moving this one? As far as, will the combined agreement be better than your current contract? Absolutely, that's what we're going for. We're going for more money, for better scheduling protections and all that stuff. And then if I have some small examples of where Hawaiian is ahead of us, Yeah, well, they actually have more than minimum staffing on a lot of their airplanes. There's actually staffing requirements for the aircraft and the specific operations in the contract. So that is really significant. It's also the only one that I know of in the industry. Second, their international per diem for not for domestic, Hawaii to domestic locations. But their international per diem is also the highest in the industry. It's 3/4 of the OCONUS rates, which are significant. And they have really significant rest requirements. Actually, before you can start, and between like long, what are called extended range trips, it's 18 hours. So that, there are a lot of scheduling provisions and a lot of trip ownership provisions in the agreement. It's very difficult to reassign them, and that's because of basically the flying that they do. It's not hub and spoke. They don't have a lot of bases where they can like move people around and reassign them. So I think it's going to be really fascinating and really time consuming to try to marry the two contracts and come up with one that works for all of the flying, and also, enshrines the protections that you have in your agreement and also carries forward the protections they have in their agreement. So we're going to have to see how this works out. It'll be a brain teaser for sure. And then let me see. I hope, Allison, I answered your questions. Let's see.
And like, I think that this work group in particular, at least for me personally, I'm a huge fan of analogies. So if anyone has ever been single, then gone to a relationship, and then had to move in with a partner, I don't know very many people who are successful in doing that in a couple of days, right? It usually tends to be a really long time. And if you are really like, let's say you're getting married or trying to build a lifetime with somebody, you're really trying to make a really earnest effort to bring in things that are really important to them and really important to you. And maybe they have appliances that you don't have, but you definitely need to bring into your house, but you don't have enough counter space for it. Like, where do you put it? How do you make it work in your home? And none of that happens in a snap. None of that happens overnight. And I think if you're really trying to create a space where you want to invite your friends over and have an outdoor space, like, it's all so meticulous and nuanced, and it all takes time, and it's a continuous build moving forward. And I think if we think of it in that kind of way, where it's like nothing's going to happen overnight, not even as fast as you want it to, you're going to have to order this piece and order that piece and go to the store and sit in the chair. Like, explain to me how that works for you at your house, because it works differently at my house. Like, really coming together and making sure that your living space and your home is something that both people can be proud of and both friends and family can come over and enjoy. So when I think of us merging the airline, that's the analogy that I like to think. It's not going to be one person coming in and it's all of their design, all of their stuff, it's all new modern, and the person who's cottage core has no say in anything, right? Like, it's how do you blend the modern with the cottage core and make it a cozy home? So that's kind of what we're trying to do with this, with the JCBA, is like two very different cultures, two very different ideologies, two business structures, to sets of operations, and how do we all make it work and feel good for both people to live there?
Okay, well, we're mid-century modern at our house. So so Allison wrote back. So thank you for writing back. Allison, you raised a really great question. Like, what do we do in the interim before the JCBA is out there and negotiated and ratified, right? That's a great question. And we have posted on the website the kind of the merger agreement, which kind of details what happens up until we have a combined agreement that's going to be effective for all groups and the groups are merged. So the operations right now have to remain separate. Alaska flight attendants have to fly on Alaska metal with Alaska pilots. The Hawaiian flight attendants have to fly on Hawaiian metal with Hawaiian pilots. And yes, the company is moving some routes around, right? They've been talking about moving the 787 to Seattle, right? So there's no Hawaiian base in Seattle. So what they're going to have to do is either live work or deadhead the flight attendant crew to Seattle from Hawaiian and under the terms of the contract, and then they'll fly the 787 to Japan or wherever they're flying it. So that's kind of how it's going to happen. So you'll see the aircraft move around the system, and maybe kind of seems like it's flying out of a Alaska base, but it's really just a reconstructed trip out of Honolulu for the Hawaiian flight attendants. So that's kind of how the company has to work around the fence agreements that we negotiated with them.
And
And
to
yes,
tag on
they
onto
are.
that, just
Pardon?
real quick, just to tag onto that, because I think what flight attendants have seen is an example is we've seen a lot of the Honolulu flying I'll call it go back, but go over to Hawaiian. But the trade-off for that is that we've actually picked up some other island flying. So the total block hours at each carrier can't go down. So they can do some shifting, but they can't actually take away like total flying from one to give to the other. It has to like come out with a balance.
Yeah, that's right. Great point, Jeff. Thank you. So the flying at both carriers is protected. And also, I mean, they've kept talking to us about they're going to have one carrier but two brands, and well, we keep asking for specifics about how they're going to do that, and they haven't been very clear in it. They're just, we're going to make it work. I'm like, so our flight attendants supposed to carry around two uniforms? Maybe. Oh, I'm like, oh my God. Okay, so we'll see what happens. You know, we unfortunately don't drive that bus, so we're just going to have to wait and see what they do and react to it. Although, you know, AFA is engaged in conversations with them about some of that stuff. But anyways, we'll see how it rolls out.
And I'll just tag on one quick second before we move on to the next one. I had the pleasure of sitting down with a negotiating member on each side, one from Hawaii and one from Alaska this week. And they're already way ahead of schedule, like looking into each other's contracts and comparing every single section and what's better in each contract. And so with JCBA, we'll be able to go in and see which one is better and start trying to pick the best of the two.
All right.
Yeah,
And then
definitely.
Allison
I'm sorry to pile on to Bryce. So I will be doing the joint contract negotiations, and I have been working with the teams, the JNC team, which is comprised of flight attendants, as Bryce said, from both carriers. And they are pinging me with questions all the time. I'm like, dudes, let me just get the Alaska contract ratified. We'll get there. But they are as Bryce said, really engaged in learning the contracts of the other carrier.
All right, and then Allison, I had a follow-up to that as well. There are rumors of how long crossover or transition training will be training on each other's metal. What is the estimate of how long the training will be, and when do we estimate that to occur?
Should I take this one, or do you want to take it, Jeff?
No, James, you go first, and if I have something to add, I will. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, the only reason why I'm jumping in here, and I apologize, is because I'm also an in-flight instructor. I'm also a member of the in-flight training committee. So I do have I've seen some roadmaps of what they're looking at. I just want to explicitly state that this is extremely fluid, and I know this is a recording, but whatever I say is not what's necessarily going to happen. So I want to throw that disclaimer out there, but this is kind of what some ideas are being thrown around me. This is an ongoing discussion, an ongoing plan. It involves a lot of different parties. And so it's a very intricate type of answer. So I can at least talk on the training side. Jeff, maybe you can elaborate more on the bargaining side and what has to happen from like union to union before we can actually materialize this, I guess. So what's going to happen this year as the company achieves a single operating certificate. So right now there's a Hawaiian certificate, there's an Alaska certificate, and they need to merge those. We're going to go through this harmonization cycle of the manuals, and I believe there's going to be 5 of those. The first one actually is February 19th, where what's going to happen is the Hawaiian Alaska manual are going to slowly start becoming one manual. So that's like one kind of like check in the box that has to happen before SOC. I know you're really curious about like the cross training and stuff like that. Once all these kind of milestones start happening, the cross training is actually going to happen later into the future. It could be 1 to 2 years for that. There has to be a mini evac that has to happen where Basically, a kind of a cadre is formed. They perform evacuations, get certified on that, and then we can start, get the program approved, and then we can start cross training. Now, there's also this kind of like philosophical talk about, well, how do you most effectively cross train a workforce when you're starting to look at multiple aircraft types? So for us, we're only operating the 737, so we're going to have to learn potentially 4 different aircraft types. And the question is do you do that piecemeal? Do you just learn one type now? Do you combine it into a larger training? Do you separate service from actual evacuation mechanics? Just the standard, how do you pre-flight emergency equipment and things like that? So that kind of roadmap is still being developed about what's the best way, because at the end of the day, looking from the last transition training, I'm not sure how long you've been here for, but it was put together in a way that didn't focus on the things that really should have been focused on. And there's danger or not danger, but I guess you want to make sure that someone's not trained on a piece of equipment and then waits 2 years to operate it, because you lose the relevancy of that. So there's a lot of thought process being put into that about how do we keep everyone trained as close to the actual cross flying time potentially, so it's all fresh. So it's a really big question to answer, because it's not fully developed, but those are all of the inputs that are being put into this to make an extremely thought out plan. So that is what's going to happen on the training side. I will tell you, it's a couple years off before that's going to happen. And then there's obviously some things that have to happen on the union side before that would even be allowable. So maybe that helps, Jeff.
I think I'll kick this over to Paula, unless you want to defer it back to me about will there be cross-training prior to a ratified joint collective bargaining agreement?
Yeah, no. They can absolutely cross-train prior to that. It's just you won't be able to work that aircraft. That's, not a 737 in Alaska's fleet. I mean, we have it down to the tail numbers. So, I mean, it's very specific about which aircraft you can work on. So yeah, no, but you can be cross-trained. They in fact, they want to cross-train folks prior, so that once the JCBA is ratified, the seniority list is merged, fences come down, and and flight attendants want it too, right? Because it gives them more ability to work on the different aircraft. So.
Thank you. And then I think there's probably the specific question was really how long is cross training going to be? And I think the rumor out there is that it's going to be a week or 2 weeks or something like that. None of the plans that I've ever heard of or seen or that's being discussed is weeks worth of cross training. I believe it is several days at the most.
Yeah.
And training, correct me if you've heard anything differently, but I've not heard.
Experience at other carriers. Totally support.
All right, and that's our last question in the queue.
Okay. Well, fantastic. Thank you for spending a good hour and a half with us. If you want to come back and do this again, we will be here on Monday, the 3rd, same time, 9 a.m. Pacific time. And you are welcome to sign up for any of the other 3 sessions that remain. You go to our contract2022.afalaska.org/TA2. You'll find the links necessary to find the signups. And as a reminder that the polls will open on February the 11th and they will close on February the 28th. Thank you, everyone, and have a good one.